There comes a moment, often after 60, when life quietly asks you a question you may have ignored for years. How much of what you carry is no longer yours to hold? It's a question that lands differently later in life, not with fear, but with a kind of holy tiredness. The exhaustion that comes from holding on longer than your heart needed to. For decades, you may have tried to control outcomes, protect everyone you love, soften life's edges, and keep your world from falling apart. But somewhere along the way, you learned a simple, liberating truth. Not everything needs your grip. Not everything requires your worry. And not every chapter asks you to fight. Buddhist wisdom teaches that letting go isn't a loss, it's a return to your own peace, your own breath, and your own quiet rhythm. After 60, this truth becomes sharper, more precious, and more necessary, because life begins to flow again when you stop caring about the noise that never mattered. In this reflection, I'll share 6 Buddhist lessons that can help you release what's been weighing you down and rediscover the deep, effortless freedom waiting beneath the surface of your days. Lesson 1. Letting go is not giving up. It's coming home to yourself. There's a misconception many people carry for most of their lives, that letting go means surrendering, losing, or quitting. But Buddhist wisdom gently reveals something very different. Letting go is not abandoning your life, it's returning to it. It's stepping out of the exhausting habit of carrying responsibilities, expectations, and fears that were never meant to define you. After 60, this becomes clearer. You've lived long enough to see how often your worry defeated you more than any real circumstance ever did. You've seen how many nights of sleep you lost, not because of what happened, but because of what might happen. You've watched relationships strain under unspoken hopes. You've clung to roles, caretaker, provider, rescuer, peacekeeper, long after life stopped asking you to. Letting go is the moment you finally stop gripping the rope that has been burning your hands. Buddhism teaches that non-attachment is not coldness, it's clarity. It's the understanding that you can love without owning, that you can care without controlling, and that you can show up without losing yourself in the process. Letting go is an act of compassion for your own heart. Ask yourself gently, what am I still holding because I fear who I'll be without it? Is it an old hurt, a memory you replay, a role you've outgrown, a responsibility you feel obligated to carry because you always have? After 60, you've earned the right, the spiritual right, to choose peace over pressure. You've earned the right to unclench your hands, soften your expectations, and allow life to move again without forcing it. Letting go isn't giving up on life, it's giving life back the space to breathe around you. It's choosing yourself again, not in a selfish way, but in a deeply honest one. Because when you stop clinging to things that have expired, you make room for the quiet joys that were waiting for you all along. Simple mornings, sincere conversations, gentler relationships, deeper presence. This is the first lesson. Letting go is a soft return to your own heart, a homecoming after years of wandering through worry. And it's never too late, not at 60, not at 70, not ever, to finally come home. Lesson 2. The freedom of not needing everyone to understand you. One of the heaviest burdens people carry through adulthood is the need to be understood, approved of, or validated by others. But something shifts after 60. You begin to taste the quiet freedom of not needing your life to make sense to anyone but you. Buddhist teachings speak often about the suffering that comes from attachment to opinions, both our own and others. When you attach your peace to how people perceive you, you become tangled in their expectations, their judgments, and their misunderstandings. You start shaping your behavior around what they might think, rather than what your heart knows to be true. But here's the subtle liberation age brings. You no longer have the energy to perform for the world. You no longer need to convince anyone that your path is worthy. You've lived enough life to know that people will misunderstand you whether you exhaust yourself trying to explain or stay silent and protect your peace. Letting go of the need to be understood is one of the most powerful shifts you'll ever make. It doesn't mean withdrawing from others or refusing connection. It means releasing the grip of approval. It means recognizing that your choices do not require permission. It means understanding that those who truly resonate with your heart will understand without explanation, and those who don't will remain confused no matter how carefully you speak. There is deep Buddhist wisdom in silence, the kind that doesn't prove anything but reveals everything. When you stop explaining yourself, you reclaim energy that was leaking out through worry. You reclaim hours of mental conversation with people who weren't even in the room. You reclaim the freedom to live as you are, not as you are perceived. Ask yourself, how much of my life have I spent trying to be understood? And what would happen if I simply lived instead? After 60, you're allowed to walk away from opinions that drain you. You're allowed to take the quieter path that makes sense only to your soul. You're allowed to let people misunderstand you and still sleep peacefully at night. This is the second lesson. Your peace is too precious to be held hostage by anyone's misunderstanding. Let go of the need to be understood, and you'll rediscover a kind of freedom that feels like air returning to your lungs. Lesson 3. Aging into ease. How life softens when you stop fighting your own mind. There comes a time, often past 60, when you begin to understand something you couldn't fully grasp earlier in life. Most of the suffering you carried wasn't caused by the world around you. It was shaped by your own thoughts about it. Not because you were weak, but because you cared deeply. Because you wanted life to be steady, predictable, safe. Yet Buddhism teaches that much of our pain comes from resisting the natural movement of the mind, trying to force it to be quiet, stable, or obedient. But the mind was never designed to be controlled. It was designed to be understood. After 60, you've lived through enough storms to recognize a quiet truth. The mind is like weather. It shifts, it changes, it moves through cycles. Thoughts rise, fall, dissolve, and return. Worry comes like a cloud, not a destiny. Sadness visits like a season, not a verdict. Fear appears like a gust of wind, not a prophecy. The suffering begins when we mistake these passing states for permanent truths. When we believe every anxious thought, when we chase every fear, when we cling to old stories that no longer serve us. But here's what wisdom and age begin to teach you. The mind loses its power when you stop wrestling it. Buddhism calls this non-resistance. Not shutting your thoughts down, not fighting them, not drowning them out with distractions, just letting them be. Watching them the way you would watch waves rise and fall on the shore. Observing without gripping, allowing without absorbing. There is profound relief in no longer treating every thought as a command. There is peace in not needing to fix what you feel. There is clarity in becoming the witness rather than the battleground. Ask yourself, how many times have I believed a thought that never came true? How many fears dissolved the moment I stopped feeding them? When you reach your 60s, a new kind of courage emerges, not the loud, determined courage of youth, but a softer courage, the bravery to release urgency, the bravery to stop debating with your inner critic, the bravery to say, "That's just a thought, it's not who I am." Because when you stop fighting your mind, life begins to feel lighter. You no longer judge yourself for having emotions. You no longer spiral into imaginary futures. You no longer exhaust yourself trying to stay in control of something that was never under your authority. This shift opens doors you didn't even know were closed. You suddenly sleep more deeply. You speak more gently. You worry less about what might happen and live more in what is happening. You begin to savor stillness. You realize that peace wasn't a destination, it was a permission you had to give yourself. This is the third lesson. Ease begins the moment you stop trying to force your mind into silence and instead learn to let your thoughts pass like clouds across an open sky. At 60 and beyond, this isn't just a teaching, it's a gift you give yourself after decades of carrying what was never yours to hold. Lesson 4. The quiet power of detaching from roles you've outgrown. For much of your life, you carried titles that shaped your identity. Parent, partner, worker, caregiver, problem solver, peacekeeper, the one who remembers everything, the one who carries everyone. These roles were meaningful, they mattered, they shaped your days and gave you purpose. But Buddhist wisdom teaches something subtle and profound. Roles are clothes for the soul, not the soul itself. They are meant to be worn, not fused to your skin. After 60, many people face a gentle but unsettling transition. Children grow into their own lives. Careers slow down or end. Responsibilities shift. And the identity you held for decades begins to soften. This can feel like loss if you cling to it, or freedom if you learn to let go. Buddhism calls this egolessness, not in a negative sense, but in a compassionate one. It's the understanding that who you are is far deeper than what you do for others. The world taught you to measure your worth by productivity, accomplishment, or usefulness. But life beyond 60 begins to whisper a different truth. You don't need a role to be worthy. You don't need a title to matter. You don't need constant doing to justify your existence. Letting go of outdated roles does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop exhausting yourself by fulfilling expectations that no longer nourish your spirit. Ask yourself, what roles am I still performing out of habit, rather than joy? Whose needs am I still putting above my own because I always have? Detaching from roles brings a profound shift. You begin to live for presence rather than performance. You begin to choose peace over perfection. You begin to honor your needs with the same tenderness you once offered everyone else. And something beautiful happens when you loosen your identity. Your relationships transform. Conversations deepen. Your presence becomes enough. Not your labor, not your fixing, not your sacrificing, just your presence. You begin to enjoy moments instead of managing them. You begin to listen without trying to solve. You begin to exist without trying to justify why you deserve rest. This is where life starts to feel different. Not empty, expansive, not lonely, spacious, not meaningless, open to new meaning. At 60 and beyond, you are allowed to redefine who you are. You are allowed to experience the world with new eyes. You are allowed to love from a place of freedom, not obligation. This is the fourth lesson. Letting go of roles you've outgrown is not the end of your identity. It is the beginning of discovering who you truly are beneath everything you've ever carried. And this discovery brings a kind of peace that only maturity, reflection, and surrender can offer. Lesson 5. Loosening your grip on outcomes, how life flows when you stop needing everything to go your way. One of the most transformative Buddhist teachings is the idea of releasing attachment to outcomes. Not because outcomes don't matter, but because clutching them with tightness suffocates the very life we are trying to shape. For decades, you may have lived believing that your effort determined everything, that if you worried enough, planned enough, controlled enough, things would turn out right. But after 60, a soft truth begins to rise. Many things you once tried so hard to control ended up unfolding in their own way anyway. Some beautifully, some painfully, some unexpectedly, but almost all beyond the reach of your anxiety. Life has always had its own intelligence. You just spent years thinking it was your job to manage it. When you loosen your grip on outcomes, something profound shifts inside you. You stop living in fear of the future. You stop rehearsing disasters that never arrive. You stop forcing timing that isn't ready. You stop chasing people who aren't meant to stay. And you begin experiencing something quieter, deeper, and more honest. Flow. Flow is not passive. It's not resignation. It's not saying, I don't care. It's saying, I trust. It's saying, I'll do my part, and the rest is not mine to control. Buddhism teaches that attachment to outcomes is rooted in fear. Fear of loss, fear of uncertainty, fear of disappointment. But letting go of outcomes is rooted in faith, not blind faith, but the faith of experience. The faith that says, I've lived long enough to know that things often unfold in ways that surprise me. Asking yourself, what if things turn out better than I imagine, becomes more natural with age. Look back on your life. How many times did you worry that something would fall apart, only to find that life led you to something better? How many times did a closed door redirect you? How many times did your fears prove louder than reality? This is what loosening the grip feels like after 60. You breathe more easily, you sleep more deeply, you stop negotiating with life and start collaborating with it. Detaching from outcomes also changes the quality of your relationships. You stop expecting people to be who you need them to be and start allowing them to be who they are. You stop bracing for disappointment and start appreciating the present moment. You stop measuring love by results and start feeling it in presence. Your days take on a softer rhythm. You become more grateful for small joys because you're not rushing through them to reach some imagined ending. You begin to experience moments without the constant pressure of what comes next. Ask yourself, what outcomes am I gripping so tightly that they are draining my peace? And what would happen if I released just a little? Because here's the quiet miracle. When you let go of outcomes, you don't lose direction, you lose tension. You don't lose motivation, you lose fear. You don't lose control, you lose the illusion that you ever needed it. Life flows more freely when you release your need to force it. You begin to trust timing rather than fear it. You begin to sense guidance in places you once overlooked. You begin to notice synchronicities, gentle nudges, unexpected alignments. This is the fifth lesson. When you stop demanding that life unfold exactly as you planned, you make space for it to unfold in ways more beautiful than you could have imagined. And the older you get, the more clearly you see that this is not just philosophy. It is how life has always worked, beneath your worry and beyond your control. Lesson 6. The quiet strength of living lightly. There is a kind of strength that doesn't look like strength at all. Not the strength of pushing, proving, or enduring, but the strength of living lightly. It's a strength that becomes especially beautiful after 60, when your spirit begins to soften and your priorities start to change. Buddhist wisdom teaches that lightness is not fragility. It is the natural result of releasing what was never meant to stay. To live lightly means you are no longer held hostage by your past. You no longer cling to old disappointments, old mistakes, or old versions of yourself. You recognize the truth that life is impermanent, and instead of fearing that impermanence, you lean into it. You allow things to come and go. You allow people to enter and leave. You allow feelings to rise and fall without trying to freeze them in place. Living lightly is not carelessness. It is clarity. It is knowing what matters enough to hold and what matters enough to release. After 60, you may notice that your heart resists heaviness in a way it didn't when you were younger. You've carried enough. You've endured storms, tasted joy, survived loss, raised families, built careers, given more of yourself than most people will ever see. And now your spirit wants something different: space, ease, softness, time. Buddhism teaches that when you stop gripping life so tightly, life finally has room to bless you. When you no longer force outcomes, the right ones unfold in their own rhythm. When you no longer insist on controlling everything, peace sits beside you like an old friend returning home. Ask yourself gently, where can I lighten my life? Which routines, obligations, or thoughts have grown too heavy? What would happen if I simply put them down? Living lightly means you trust that life will hold you, even when you stop holding everything together. It means you choose gratitude over worry, presence over pressure, and inner steadiness over outer noise. This is the sixth lesson. Your greatest power now is not in force, but in gentleness. Not in carrying the world, but in walking through it with a softer, freer heart. Lightness is not the absence of responsibility. It is the presence of peace. You've lived long enough to know that letting go is not the end of anything. It's the beginning of everything that matters. These 6 lessons are not rules, but invitations. Invitations to breathe more deeply, to walk more gently, and to trust that life still has quiet gifts waiting for you. As you release what no longer serves you, you create space for what truly does. And in that space, life begins to flow again, effortlessly, naturally, beautifully.